We just talked a little bit about what's going on in public polling right now in terms of how the American people are feeling about the Trump administration and President Trump this far into his second term. Here's a little bit more on a specific subject. YouGov asked Americans how serious a problem they think it is that a whole bunch of senior Trump administration officials shared military plans in a group chat on a commercial messaging app, which accidentally included a journalist, even though they didn't notice he was part of the chat. The proportion of Americans who say this is a, quote, very serious or somewhat serious problem is nearly 3/4 of respondents, 74% of the country. The percentage of people who say that's no big deal is only 13%. This scandal is a serious problem, even according to 60% of Republicans. On the long list of things that are dumb and bad and potentially illegal about sharing imminent military attack plans on a messaging app with a large group where you don't know who's even on there, there is the matter of Trump's national security advisor setting those group chat messages to disappear. You can do that on the Signal app, and some of the messages were set to disappear 4 weeks after they were sent. Others were set to disappear after just 1 week, which might mean that some of them are already gone. The reason that's a problem is that there are real laws that get enforced about preserving federal records, which belong to the American people. The vice president and cabinet secretaries and the White House chief of staff discussing imminent military strikes definitely counts as a federal record, even if you do it in a chat app, and it therefore must be preserved. You can't set it to disappear. The government transparency group American Oversight filed a lawsuit on that part of this story. Today, in that case, a federal judge ordered multiple Trump cabinet officials that they must preserve those Signal messages. Then there's the fact that at least one member of the group chat, Trump's real estate friend, who says he's now very, very personally close with Vladimir Putin. They have a really, really intense, emotional, personal friendship. Steve Witkoff has now confirmed publicly, I think, kind of despite himself, I think he sort of accidentally confirmed publicly that he participated in this group chat on his personal cell phone, not on a government-issued device. Now that matters because personal devices generally have much less robust cyber protections against things like spyware, which raises a whole new level of security concerns about this, separate and apart from what they were discussing here. If these guys are doing sensitive, potentially classified government business on their personal devices, if their personal devices have been compromised, then it doesn't matter like what the encryption level is of the app that they're using. If their personal devices have been compromised, it's possible that any sort of bad actor might have access to every single thing they type or see on their phone. Now we know that at least one of them was participating in this Signal chat about imminent military attack plans on his personal phone. How many of the rest of you were doing that? What they were discussing, though, turns out to be the really big problem in terms of what specifically these guys were blurting out in this insecure group chat. After the operation they had been discussing, these airstrikes in Yemen, after that was over, Trump National Security Advisor Mike Waltz wrote this in the chat. He said, quote, "The first target, their top missile guy. We had positive ID of him walking into his girlfriend's building, and it is now collapsed." Well, the Wall Street Journal reports today that that positive ID of the guy they were targeting, that was, according to the Wall Street Journal, sensitive intelligence from a human source in Yemen, intelligence that had been provided to the United States by Israel. In other words, Israel had a source on the ground feeding them very specific information in real time, and Mike Waltz referenced that information in a way that effectively described the source in this group chat on a commercial app. According to one U.S. official, quote, "Israeli officials complained privately to U.S. officials that Waltz's texts became public. Quote, Israel's role in supplying information that helped track the militant highlights the sensitivity of some disclosures in the texts and raises questions about the Trump administration's contention that no classified information was shared on the Signal chat. The identity of a person in Yemen who was supplying information in real time about the strikes would likely be carefully protected." Yeah, you think? I mean, these guys may not get it, but the American people seem to. I mean, 3/4 of Americans say this seems like a really serious problem. Anybody can see that this is not stuff you should be texting about with a large group, right? Or maybe texting about at all. I guess not these guys. Joining us now is one of the authors of this Wall Street Journal scoop. Alexander Ward is a Wall Street Journal national security reporter. He's author of the book, The Internationalists, The Fight to Restore American Foreign Policy After Trump. Mr. Ward, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Let me just ask you if I got the basics right there about your reporting here. Mike Waltz didn't describe like the name of the source, but he did describe with some specificity the type of information this source was able to provide. That's what Israeli officials are worried about?
Right. So we should note that this information was provided in real time, right? And if you look at those texts on Signal, you saw that Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, was saying, you know, planes in the air, bombs are going to happen at this time. And then Waltz chimes in and goes, hey, we effectively have an assessment here. We've seen that one of these people we were tracking, one of this Houthi top missile man, went into his girlfriend's house, and we've seen it destroyed. And this was a positive ID, that they ID'd this person going into the building, and it's unclear if ID'd afterwards. But point is, that's real-time information, right? And that was provided by the Israelis to the U.S. And we should note, the U.S. has other ways to positively ID. Waltz does say in those texts, you know, there were multiple IDs. So it's not like it was wholly reliant on Israeli intelligence, but it's fair to say that Israeli intelligence provided to the U.S. informed, at a minimum, the text that Mike Waltz put into Signal, which, of course, as you said, is a publicly available non-governmental app on what seemed to be unclassified networks.
Now, everything that I know about spying, I've basically learned from like Len Deighton novels. Like, I don't know. Who am I? I'm just a person who reads the news. Like, I have no expertise in this other than spy movies and spy novels. But it seems to me like when we talk about protecting sources and methods, this is kind of like an almost an elementary school level case study, because you can infer from that statement from Mike Waltz, which went to this large group in a commercial app, that somebody has a source on the ground in the capital of Yemen who can see that apartment building and who can also communicate to some intelligence service somewhere in the world what he or she is seeing at that building and what the physical consequences have been of the strike that are being described. I mean, that seems to me like for anybody in Sana'a who's trying to figure out who that source is or what they have to worry about in their network, they've now been essentially given a template to find that person.
Yeah, at a minimum, there are now Houthi operatives who know that there could be a spy among them or within their networks more generally. Now, whether they learned that from our reporting or whether there was a way they could see that information from if the Signal chat was spied on and released to the Houthis, I doubt that was the case, to be honest. But who's to say? The point is we don't know, but the possibility exists because it was put on Signal, which is the point here, right? These kinds of conversations should be happening in secure facilities in the Pentagon, in the Situation Room, or, you know, as government officials, high-level government officials, are provided SCIFs or other kinds of communications tools in order to have these conversations at home. Or, you know, if they have to leave their families at home, go into their government buildings, go into the secure facility and have these kinds of conversations. On weekends, late nights, it's not efficient or ideal, but it's how you protect these secrets. And so, sure, it is more efficient to put this kind of stuff on Signal. You can do that. But you do open yourself up to the possibility that that becomes public or is intercepted in some way by adversaries. Does that mean it's likely? I can't say that with any sense of certainty, but I can say it's definitely not 0%, right? And so this is the issue now, is of course now it's out in public in our story, but at a minimum, one could assume that that intelligence went in there, and if it were to somehow, some way, make it to the intended targets, they would go, there is a spy among us.
Right. Mr. Ward, briefly, one of the things that we hear about in intelligence reporting is that our allies with whom we share intelligence may be less likely to do so in the future if they feel that we in the United States are mishandling it or handling it in a way that is cavalier. Briefly, do you have any sense that that risk is essentially coming to fruition right now, either with Israel or other allies based on this scandal?
Well, we have heard even before this, right, just because of, you know, President Trump's own views on the war in Ukraine and his talking to Russia, because of Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard and her views on Syria and Russia and others, there has just been some hesitation about sharing as much intelligence as before with the United States. You can imagine after this now there'll be even more pause. Now, whether that actually leads to a slowdown of intelligence sharing, I don't know. I haven't seen any direct evidence at the moment, but I have heard from foreign officials who are already wary of providing as much intel, as much in-depth intel to the U.S. as before, and I can't imagine that this episode helps.
Wow. Alexander Ward, national security reporter at the Wall Street Journal. This is really, really interesting and important reporting. Thank you for helping us understand it.
Thanks for having me.